Welcome, everybody. This is Ron Gallagher with the Pennsylvania Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. We just opened up the event, so attendees are starting to come in. So we're going to take another minute or so to allow the attendees to get in before we officially kick off this call-in show. Okay, we're going to get started. The registrants are slowly coming into the meeting. I want to thank you for you folks taking time out of your schedule to listen in on this call with the insurance department. This is June 15th. This will probably be the last scheduled call with the insurance department, and we'll work with them and with the Insurance Federation if something breaks and we need to do this again in the future. But it seems to me we're getting to the normal within the new normal, and as a result, there's not as many things that we need to announce or go over. Today we have a special guest. Jessica Altman is sitting in on the call. She's our insurance commissioner. And I know, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're the one that's going to probably go over most of the new things. So Mike Humphreys is the chief of staff, and I want to welcome the rest of the senior staff to the call as well. So Mike, it's all yours.
And we're actually going to start with the commissioner, Ron.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ron, and thanks everyone for joining. I wanted to make sure to join today because it is, as Ron said, the last of what we'll call our regularly scheduled programming for these calls. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of you for making time for these calls. Thanks to Ron and Sam for organizing them and really having this forum to directly communicate through what has been certainly a unique and challenging past couple of months that sometimes feels like 3 days ago and sometimes feels like 3 years ago, but we're all getting through it day by day. And just wanted to also reiterate, just because it does seem like we've hit our stride a bit and the questions are kind of calming down, so we're not going to have these calls pre-scheduled, that does not mean that we are not available or will not make ourselves available as a department if there are issues that merit either a broad conversation like getting this group back together, or of course if any of your individual companies would like to talk to us about issues impacting you or concerns that you have, please do not hesitate to reach out. And obviously I have my whole team, privileged to have them here on the call, and you know who to call, but if not, don't hesitate to reach out and we'll get you to the right place in the department. So I just wanted to make sure to be here to kind of extend that thank you and that commitment to ongoing communication. But I will turn it back to Mike to kind of MC the content for the day. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Sam. And take it away, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. And as a friendly reminder for everyone, y'all know the drill, but if you could start pushing your questions through on the Q&A tab, it'll make sure that we have some questions queued up for once our prepared remarks conclude. We do have a couple of agenda items that we wanted to walk through today and provide a general update on kind of what we're doing here and what we're seeing. So if you want to start asking those questions, that would be great. And surely as they come up as we go through the agenda, feel free to continue to add questions. So the first item that we really wanted to talk about is a brief update on the Reopening Pennsylvania plan. We have, as you've seen, the governor has continued to push out additional guidance. All counties are currently in the yellow. There's a number moving over to the green, including Dauphin County at the end of this week. And what green generally means is and we've received this question a couple of times. So I do want to make clear that even in green, telework remains strongly encouraged to the extent possible. Now, while businesses that were operating at 50% in yellow can move up to 75% capacity in green, there is still the priority towards telework where it meets the needs of your businesses. And while operating in green, those that are coming into the office obviously must follow CDC and our Department of Health guidance for social distancing and cleaning. The guidance also relates to masks, which we've been asked about a couple of times as well. And masks should be worn at all times by employees with certain exceptions, health conditions, when employees are eating, obviously, or within personal offices. So that's generally where we are. The department itself, I know this question has come up a few times, is also moving towards figuring out what green status looks like and are deliberately taking our time in moving back into the office. So you will not see, despite Dauphin going green at the end of this week, you will not see us at 100% capacity at Strawberry Square next week. You won't see us at 100% capacity by the end of this month, probably well into July, as we are evaluating internally the needs of our team and kind of mission critical purposes for having people in the office versus working remotely, which we found it to be able to do very successfully. I don't know if the commissioner, if you wanted to make any additional comments on kind of the reopening.
Sure, Mike, I can. I think for us at the department, what's most important is two things. One, of course, making sure that our core functions continue to be performed at our usual level. And I actually think that we have done that very successfully, even in a almost entirely telework environment. And the second, though, is to really put the comfort and well-being of our employees first. And like many of you, our employees are very concerned about coming back too soon. We have many employees who fall into categories of those potentially more vulnerable to COVID, and we just need to make sure that we get it right. So while we are working on that plan to start bringing more people back, it is very likely to be quite phased in over time, and very appreciative of the concerns and needs of our employee base. And I, for one, am incredibly confident that we can do that without really missing a beat when it comes to our core functions. So if you have questions about that, concerns about that, you can certainly reach out if you were hoping to come in or something, and we'll facilitate virtual meetings and that. But I would say while we are going to, green means for us the start of the process, but it's going to be a process, and we're not alone in that. I think I've been telling people that the Strawberry Square elevators may be our downfall in this, because there is always a crush to get into those elevators at core times, and that's just not something that we can have right now. And so it's also not just about PID, it's also about, in particular, the Department of Revenue and OAG, who share larger portions of our tower. So there's a lot of discussions going on Commonwealth-wide within Strawberry Square across the agencies with which we share our tower, and with PID itself about how we do this right. And we will keep you all apprised, but if you have questions about when it will be appropriate to have in-person meetings or things like that, reach out and we'll have that conversation. But the answer will definitely be not quite yet. So thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next item that we wanted to address, we'll turn it over to Chris Monahan, as there's a number of producer licensing updates that we wanted to provide today, not the least of which was a press release we sent out earlier this afternoon that is now available online. And as Chris is talking, I will provide the link. So go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Mike. So right now, with all our counties in yellow and green phase. That means that all 10 of the testing facilities that operate in cities across Commonwealth are open, and they have been open. Some of them have been open for a number of weeks. Others have opened just in the last week or so, but all 10 facilities are now open. We are having candidates come in to test, so that's good news. Additionally, as Mike said, there was a press release today by the department about remote testing, electronic testing. For the first time, Pennsylvania will have this as an option for testing. That will go live July 1st. It is not a temporary issue. It is something that we are going to use moving forward. It will be a new option for everybody to use in place of or instead of the facilities testing, although both will continue to be options for people. And then the third thing was the temporary licensing. We are going to leave that up and running until at least remote testing goes live, and for a little bit while after that too, just to make sure that we have, the capacity for all our different types of options here for testing. One of the things that we had problems with, and we hadn't foreseen this, was existing licensees who were looking to test when our licensing centers or our testing centers were down. They were looking to add a line of authority, and they couldn't because they couldn't test. And the way we wrote our business rules originally, it didn't foresee this. However, under temp licensing, we have been able to fix that so that existing licensees looking to expand the line of authority can now either test, or under temporary licensing, they can add that additional authority until they get a chance to test. So there's some updates from our licensing area and our testing area.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. And just so everyone knows, you should now in the chat box be able to access the press release that I just posted in there. We waited till the last meeting to learn that I had that capability, but here you go. So the next agenda item we wanted to talk about was a press release we issued last week, which provided guidance for businesses experiencing damage that may have been resultant from civil unrest in partnership with, or that happened in conjunction with some of the protests that were going on across the state. We issued a press release that linked to a page that really just talks about different coverages that businesses may have that are kind of commonly purchased coverage, and we give kind of brief synopses of what each would look like, trying to make it more of a resource than it was obviously a policy page, but wanted to make sure that we made that available to folks as we had pretty quickly started getting a couple of calls about how to handle damage in the areas that maybe were still in the red or yellow phases, and they were in the process of reopening. So we tried to create that website as a resource for individual business owners. With that said, one other item there that we mentioned in the press release is kind of a call for carriers to try to expedite claims in those areas to the extent possible, recognizing kind of the situation that businesses are in, having been closed or just now opening, and then maybe have some windows broken out or some additional damage on top of that. So we're hopeful that the companies will work with business owners as these claims are coming in. And if you have any questions, we're obviously here to answer your questions as much as we are the policyholders. With that, I will move on to one issue that is relatively new, probably more of an issue that those on the phone that have, in particular, a dental line, maybe some of the health and life carriers that participate on the call. But recently, we have received a couple of complaints related to what seems to be a PPE or mitigation fee that is being tacked on to a bill for service. It is an issue that we have seen particularly on the dental service side from dental offices billing for either PPE for patients or physicians and or for mitigation enhancements in the office. We are continuing to evaluate this issue and working with some of our sister agencies. But I would turn it over to Sandy if there's any additional context.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The context really is the balance billing and surprise balance bill comment that we had in our notice. It seems like it was a long time ago, 2020-03, back at the beginning of the pandemic, where we encouraged health insurers to assist insureds to avoid balance billing and surprise bills. Certainly the PPE or mitigation effort piece of a bill is a surprise to consumers, and there may be an opportunity in an insurance company's contract with the provider to address that. It may be a piece of the contract, and so we're looking at how we might be able to encourage insurers to make sure that that contract is enforced as it is written. The other thing we're doing is working with, as Mike said, our sister agencies, and that includes the Attorney General's office. They have an unfair trade practices law as well as a price gouging act, which gives them some leverage to address concerns about both the PPE mitigation fee as well as any exorbitant charges in the lab context or other service context. So those are the issues that we're spotting and want to address for the protection of consumers, to hold consumers harmless so that they get the treatment and services they need without being stuck with a bill that they did not anticipate, should not have had to anticipate. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Sandy. I don't know, Commissioner, did you have anything additional to add on this?
I think Sandy covered it perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, one last agenda item, very briefly, so I will encourage you to submit your questions now. Appointment fees. We mentioned this several weeks ago. We still actually have $10 million in unpaid appointment fees from the carriers. It was originally due at the end of April. We provided a 1-month extension to the end of May, but that still remains unpaid at this time. So Chris's group, Chris, if you could jump in and kind of provide the feedback or provide information on how the companies will be hearing from your group in terms of how to pay in the event that the folks on the call today aren't those that are in the position to cut the check or make the payment, but can shake the tree at the office to make sure we're getting these paid. So Chris?
Sure. So we will be sending out, or we already have sent out, email reminders for those companies where we have current email addresses, letting them know if they have appointment fees which are past due. And companies that have amounts of $100,000 or more will be given instructions how to pay electronically. Companies that have less than $100,000 owed, because of the way revenue processes these things now, and it could change in the future, but for now, they'll still be given direction as to how they should submit their check and the reminder that it needs to come in. Additionally, our budget office should be sending out dunning statements to everybody, showing the amount that's overdue. So if anyone has any questions on appointment fees, they can feel free to reach out to my office, and we could give them more information, or when they get the dunning statement, they can obviously reach out to Budget. Budget has direct access to this information as well.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. One issue that has come to my attention is kind of a other business notice. I'll turn it over to Shannon just really briefly to put something on your radar. So
Yeah,
Shannon.
thanks, Mike. I just want to let everybody know that we did get a PCRB filing. The filing came in Friday evening, so we're just getting into it. So I don't have really any answers for questions at this time. But we typically will create a public notice bulletin allowing the public comment for 30 days. So we just want to say look forward to that. There's a lot of information in there, but we, like I said, haven't gone through it, but it does address the temporary staffing. So that's something that may be of interest to you. So when that does come out, please take the time to make comment on that bulletin.
Very good. Thanks, Shannon. With that, that will be the last prepared issue that we have. I will turn to the questions. And the first one is, I understand the Statutory Accounting Working Group is meeting today to develop industry guidance on how to handle refund programs. The major distinction, as I understand it, is that some regulators want to treat the refund against earned premium and others are looking to treat the refund as an expense. Does the department have a position on this? And will regulators allow for one-time deviations? Any insight is appreciated. Joe, if you wouldn't mind giving an update on where the STAT working group is, that would be great.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, there was a call today. It was from 11 to 1. It was regulators and the industry. It was both. There's different positions. Some regulators had different positions than the others, but the two positions are it should be an adjustment to premium, whatever refund was provided to policyholders. It should be recorded on the statutory accounting basis as a reduction in premium. There were also some regulators and companies that were pushing the expense treatment. Instead of being recorded as a reduction in premium, it would be recorded as generally an underwriting expense. Again, both sides had their opportunity to voice their opinions, and there was a vote today by the working group. There were 13 present today in the working group. 11 participated and voted for the reduction in premium. It had to be an adjustment to premium that would be recorded on the financial statements as opposed to a reduction in expense. And the basic difference was it impacts the financial statements in different ways. Some of the expense ratios would be overstated if it was recorded as underwriting expense. And I think for the most part, the majority voted because they believe that for consistency purpose, there was a way under the existing statutory accounting principles to recognize what happened here. And that consistency really pointed towards an adjustment to premium as opposed to an expense report. Now, if the companies want to proceed with an underwriting expense and continue to record it as such, there is a permitted practice that they can go to their domiciled state, request, and get permission to do that. So there is a way out if in fact it was already set up as an underwriting expense. There were endorsements that were provided to various insurance departments that were approved, and in those cases they're looking to record that as an underwriting expense. The provision that may enable them to do that is through a prescribed or permitted practice. And I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Yes.
One question that I think is somewhat related is, will the PID be taking any action against those carriers that did not make any concessions, i.e. return of premium to policyholders as PID encouraged? And there, we obviously, and the question acknowledges that there was no requirement in the guidance that we provided. We continued to encourage both in terms of what your blocks of business look like and how they've changed over the last couple of months. And then in terms of providing flexibility on how those payback programs are administered. So at this time, that's where we are and how we continue to work with companies on them. We obviously have filings that come in even today that talk about kind of changes in driving patterns. And I know Shannon's team has gone back and forth quite a bit with a couple of you on some of the information and the base data that you're using in terms of different filings that we are seeing, most particularly on the auto side. But that's where we are and how we have addressed it on a kind of filing by filing basis and a complaint basis for the time being. As you all know and have heard me say, that we're a complaint-driven agency and will be in the future. So we'll see what kind of feedback continues to come in from consumers as well as the filings from the company. One question here: does the department support SB 1195 changes to the Guarantee Fund Act? This is actually a bill that we've worked very closely with Sam and the IFP members on, sharing language several months ago to as recent as a week or so ago. So we recognize the intent behind the NAIC model, the national compromise between life and health insurer associations, and are trying to work with the IFP and one of our sister agencies in particular to hopefully see this cross the finish line this year. I don't know if the commissioner had any additional comments.
Nothing really to add to that, Mike. So yes, absolutely. We've been working with the IFP and are supportive of the model moving forward. As Mike said, I think there's some work to do to, in particular, educate and give some comfort to our sister agencies who also have impacts from this legislation before it gets across the finish line. So we are doing that ourselves and also hoping and facilitating that industry does that directly as well. But look forward to continuing to work together on that legislation as well as credit for reinsurance as sessions continue. So that's it.
Very good. And we're at our final question. So if, for those of you that are considering sending the question, you're running out of time to do it. So the final question is Stat Code 1212. Are you getting a lot of interest and or questions on the use of Code 1212? We are simply trying to get a feel for the interest from the policyholders. Our experiences seem to be limited at first, but we are seeing more questions now after announcing the definition and use of the code. To my knowledge, we have not had much feedback at this point, but I'm going to turn it over to Shannon and maybe John Lasik also.
Yeah, thanks,
Shannon?
Mike. This is Shannon. So we haven't received a lot of questions at PID, but the PCRB might be receiving more questions. Understanding that the use of this code, may have been temporary. Some workers are getting paid to not work, and even some other employees are. But payroll can be reported to Stat Code 1212 and be excluded from rating. So given that you guys are getting questions, that's something that if there are complaints, you send them through us. If not, then you definitely can go through the PCRB to get questions. But it's helpful because it, kind of lets them know where the exposures are for the employees. And it gives the opportunity for the employers to kind of track that as well using that code. I don't know if John Lasik, if you had anything more to add.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I think that's a good synopsis of it. We have had some initial discussions with PCRB about the use of that stat code. But, again, we don't administer the statistical manual or program that is the PCRB. We do understand that they are either developing or have developed procedures for reporting under stat code 1212. And so, we would encourage you to reach out to PCRB on that one. Is about, when is it appropriate to use statutory or stat code 1212? When is it not appropriate? What are the circumstances? What kind of documentation you have to have? So yes, we have seen some interest in stat code 1212, but for the most part, we would refer those questions over to PCRB.
Good, thank you both. So I'm going to the questions, and I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat function. So with no further questions, I will turn it back over to the commissioner.
Thanks, Mike. Nothing much other than just a final thank you for this conversation, which definitely brought up some new things and good conversations, as well as all the other conversations, and a really huge thanks to my own team on the line, to Mike, all of the deputies and all of the other subject matter experts we have on the line who have just, obviously I'm biased, but done an absolutely fantastic job to be really responsive and communicative during what has been a crazy few months. And I know all of you are hopefully feeling the same about your own teams, but look forward to talking further. And as I said at the beginning, if you need us, we are here. And I think it's probably quite a good sign that we've gotten to the point that we don't need to have these standing calls, because we've figured out a lot of things. But if we need to be back in touch, we will be back in touch. So that's all, Mike. Thanks.
All right, Ron, we will kick it back to you.
Actually, as I typically do, I give Sam and the Insurance Federation a chance to close the meeting out, and Sam has raised his hand. So Sam, it's all yours to close us out.
Yeah, and I know we join, Ron and I both thank you, Insurance Department, and thank you all the participants on these calls for what have been over these trying months. Some very frank and very productive discussions. It's a healthy dialogue for the marketplace. Just some updates on Senate Bill 1195 with the Flegal law. As Mike and the commissioner referenced, we're working. I know we're having I'm having a call with the Revenue Department just to go over the lack of financial impact to the Commonwealth on Wednesday. So that should be on track. Obviously, there will be nits and picks as there always are as the legislative process moves on. And it's our hope that we're not only partnering with the department on this, but partnering with it on the credit for reinsurance legislation, and sort of makes sense that those go together. And then a question that I would have, I guess, for Sandy, on the PPE, mitigation fees that we're seeing in the dental area. We agree on the holding harmless. The question is when the consumer gets it, and consumer may have a certain set cap. I'm not sure, while we can try to twist the dentist's arm, and in some policies, some types of policies, we're incorporating that, but particularly when it's a network dentist, but particularly in out-of-network scenarios, that can get, there's only so much arm twisting.
Understood. And I hate to give a lawyer answer, but it all depends. It depends on the facts of the situation. And that is why, as I've talked with my colleagues up in the Attorney General's office, I say up, they're upstairs from us when we're in the office. We're working together to look at these complaints and to see what is the appropriate way to deal with the particulars. So I don't have a ready answer, but if you see something like that that concerns you, or if you get complaints from people who have been exposed to those fees, and it is not within the power of your contractual arrangement to address, we're looking at how best to facilitate a response, and that would be very likely us and or the Attorney General's office possibly working together on a joint response.
Sandy, this is Ron. Just to follow up on Sam's question, is the Dentistry Licensing Board at all involved with this as well? Are they getting complaints, or should they be receiving some of these complaints, especially for the Pennsylvania licensed dentists? Because clearly, as Sam mentioned, there could be out-of-network dentists because you're traveling that wouldn't be licensed in PA. But are you working with them as well?
Good question, Ron. We haven't heard from them on this, but it is certainly something that, yeah, they license dentists, so that is an angle to the issue.
Okay.
Good questions.
I'm sure we'll
Sam?
hear something along these lines. You know, it won't surprise me when auto repair shops put a PPE, you know, mitigation costs, and you know, I mean, we may see it. And I mean, I say that somewhat flippantly, but you know, I mean, obviously, the mitigation costs are mitigation costs, you know, and they're going to be passed on. And it wouldn't surprise me that we'll see this in, you know, in a lot of other billing scenarios for services.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Sam, why don't you close us out, and we'll move on with our day.
Well, we thank everybody, and as I think it goes for all of us, be safe and be well, and you know, those go hand in hand. So, you know, wear those masks and keep that distance, but keep engaged.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, everybody else, have a great day. Thank you for attending this and this call today. And if we do have another one, we'll be sending it out to our mailing list to let you know. Okay. Thank you once again. Bye now.
Bye.